This time I'm using my nice shiny Iwater Eclipse in Anger. It's brand new, straight out of the box, so let's see how we get on. Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie and you join me today on an airbrush video where we actually put paint onto models. And today we're using enamels and the subject are these HAA wagons from Hornby. Because what I'd like to do is try to lift them, not to the same standard, but to run in a rake that's comparable with the HAA wagons from Accurascale and Couplings. Now clearly these are never going to compete, but when you see them trundling along the layout, you might be able to get away with it. And we can't all afford these very expensive models. So what are we going to do with these? Well, the first thing you need to do, what I need to do, is to backdate them because these are labelled HAAs. Now, HAA is a post-tops term and my layout is based between sort of 1968, 1974-ish, which is a pre-tops era. So instead of being labelled HAA, mine need to be labelled HOP-AB, that's hopper air braked. Right. I also need to somehow remove the decals from these because they refer to HAA, and also I need to spray the cradles up. Now these cradles, as you can see, are in sort of a later red livery, whereas actually I need them in the old BR bauxite type colour. So to that end, yesterday I prepared a few of these. I took them apart, which you can do with a pair of pliers, but do go easy. And I naturally washed them up to make sure they had no sort of oil and residue on them. After which I took them outside and attacked them with a can of Halford's white primer. And eventually we end up here today with my little cradles, all lovely. So they're dried now, that primer is dried, ready to go. So I'm going to hit those with a bauxite paint from Phoenix Precision, and it's P129 BR Freight Wagon Bauxite Post 19664 matte. So hopefully this should give me a shade that's comparable to the hoppers that I own from Couplings and Accurascale. Now looking a little closer at these wagons, this is the HOP-AB from Accurascale. This is the version from Couplings. This is the early version from Hornby that I intend to improve. And this is a later version from Hornby, which has a particular point of interest being the rivet detail. Because on this one, there is an extra line of rivets across the top of the wagon. Now this hopper replaced about 80% of the original ones without the rivets, but this was done around about 1980, 1982. So if you need your wagons to be HOP-AB, then clearly these are the wagons you need, the ones without that extra row of rivets. So these ones here really can't be backdated to HOP-AB because of a row of rivets. How sad are we today then, Charlie? Now I've no intention of removing the decals from this wagon. What I'm simply going to do is just going to repaint it. There is no lip there, so it went on, during manufacture. There's no real point in trying to scrape this off and trying to get a decent match. I'm just going to simply blow a coat of Phoenix Precision P987 steel. I had also considered using Humbrol's Silver 11, which is like a matte metal, but I think the Precision steel seems to be more in keeping with the colour of the hopper. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and if you hit the little bell icon and go for all, then you get a notification every time I release a new video. Now hopefully you've watched the airbrush videos number 1 and 2, because that gave you some background information about mixing paints and equipment and all that sort of blah. Right, so what am I using today? I have invested in an Iwater Eclipse. This is a brand new brush, it's never seen paint, so hopefully if you're making your own way in this, we're in the same kind of boat. So the Iwater Eclipse, and that's attached to my compressor. The compressor is set to 20 psi, and that is set when the valve is open. So you get your airbrush, turn it on, then adjust the air pressure up to 20 psi, and you'll be kind of where I am now. Obviously I've got an extraction booth. I have a face mask suitable for the use with enamel paints. Thinning paints, I'm using Phoenix paints, so naturally I'm going to use Phoenix thinners. It makes perfect sense to me. Why would I use a IPA or white spirit to thin them down? I don't want to use sort of second-class products on my trains and locomotives and everything else for the price of £8 for a can of thinners that will last for years. Why not use the right stuff? Thinning the paints down, you mix them up, and I use these little medicine cups, and you can buy 300 of these on Amazon for about £10. There's a link in the Show More tab. But mixing paint is always an issue, because obviously you've got to mix it in these dreadful little tinlets. So what I use for that is I invested in what is nothing more than a cocktail stirrer, really. Anyway, battery operated, a couple of AA batteries, and that should whisk up the paint, because these paints tend to have a thickness, if you like, at the bottom of the can. So mixing them up with that should be good to go. And then I will decant a small amount into one of these cups and then thin it down accordingly with the liquid. Lovely. And then hopefully it should spray. But a word of warning, don't even think of putting paint in your airbrush unless you have the means to clean it. Now, whether you're using acrylics, and you can use these more available washes to get, to thin them down and wash the brush out, or if you're using enamels, you might, as I do, using sort of a white spirit or white spirit substitute to get it all out. Because if you don't, whatever happens, leave paint to go hard in your airbrush, because it could be a nightmare to clean off. That's the only bad thing, the only downside about airbrushing is cleaning the thing afterwards. But if you just crack on with it, it's quite simple, really. And then when you change from one paint to another, you don't need to dismantle the airbrush to wash it all out. All you need to do is get rid of that paint, flush it through, in my case with some white spirit, and get rid of the bulk site, and then we'll hopefully load up with the steel and do the hopper wagons. So that all makes sense. I do own a set of brushes to clean the airbrush nozzles and that sort of stuff, and these are available from squires.com. What else have I got? A roll of blue roll to do any mopping up sort of thing. And over here, you probably saw this flash by earlier. This is a crib board for those of you who may or may not play cards. I bought it on eBay. These are ordinary barbecue meat skewers, and there's little crocodile clips I've glued on the end, and it's an ideal way of allowing your stuff to dry without you getting your hands all over it. So to paint one of these, there's a little clip, so I shall spray it up one side and then spray it up all over, pop it to dry, and then when I've done them all, I can take the clip off, put it on the other end and spray it. And these will probably take 2 or 3 coats of paint, but it's a case of suck it and see, really. But the main thing is we're not putting our hands all over it. We're using these cocktail sticks, and it makes perfect sense to have something like a crib board on which to allow them to dry freely. With the hopper wagons, I have invested in the past in this thing. It sort of goes inside a locomotive body. But with my hopper wagons, I've been and sprayed the inside of these, because these come grey. I'm so sad. So I've sprayed these also with the Halford's white primer, but these will hold them down. So hopefully I can spray the steel paint and get a reasonable finish. I've wiped them down with white spirit or IPA just to make sure there's no residue of grease or whatever on these. So we should be all good to go. Right. Time to mix up the bauxite paint, thin it down and crack on. A couple of late additions to the list, and that is disposable gloves and the old pipette. Right, here we go. So if I take off the top of my paint, and hopefully, let's see how, now I can feel in the bottom it is a little bit gloopy. I'm kind of a little worried whether this will all come charging out. You can see a bit of splattering here, so clearly you don't want to take this device out of the paint whilst it's still running. Yes, you can see it sort of splattering around the table, but I think we're good to go. And you can see where it's splattered on the table, really. So you know that yes, it was. You can't take that thing out; it will go everywhere. Right. So I need to decant a little bit in here, not too much. Now, as you can see, there's very little in this cup. So now with my thinners and the pipette, start to mix it up, and the consistency of skimmed milk. I must confess, as luck would have it, I don't think that's too bad. Shame about the mess on the table. Oh, and my hands. So much for the gloves. So now it's simply a case of pouring the paint into the airbrush. And that's when you realise how much I've made up. And you think, gosh, I didn't really need that much, but hey, we are where we are. Pop on the lid, and then I'm afraid it's a case of the voiceover because of all the noise. Well, that all appeared to go swimmingly well, and for a first coat it looks okay. But there was an issue, because when I stopped and compared it to the colour of the Acura scale and the Cavalex model, clearly it's the wrong shade. So before we progress any further with that bauxite colour, we need a rethink. And I think we need to use the Humbrol Matte 100. So what I shall do is empty the airbrush, reload it, remix it, and have another go at the next cradle with this colour and see if we need to add a little black, add a little white, adapt it to get in the area of this shade on this Acura scale wagon. This time it's too orange. Now, after several false starts, hopefully you can see that now we are getting much closer to the accurate scale colour shades. So I shall firstly go and paint over the ones I've done, and then we'll get ready to move on to the steel. Now, as I mentioned with these HAAs, all I want to do really is cover these decals, but I didn't feel that I could spray them and it would come out okay just over that area of masking them up. So I'm just going to put a coat over it and see what it looks like. If it's, of course, this horrendous mess, I can always use some white spirit and take the whole lot off again. And whilst we listen to the distant siren, I'll turn it all on. Ooh. I must confess, I'm chuffed to bits with those results. I mean, you can't even see where the decal is underneath. Of course, we're now at the end of the day, and now we need to clean the diddle darling. So I've emptied the paint back into the paint pot. What we do next is you put your thumb over the end and you give it a press, and that should blow back any paint into the paint cup. So anything we can shake out here is brilliant. And then now I have got one of these little beasties here, and the idea is you put your cleaning agent in the top and give it a blast, and it blows the paint through the airbrush. Now this is a airbrush cleaner from Howells which I've got sort of left over, so if I pour some of that into there, and then if you can see the sort of amount, and then just give it a blast, and all we're doing is kind of empty it through, and you can see the fumes coming out. I will put the extractor on for these fumes, and that should blow most of the muck out of the paintbrush. Nearly there. Now the old blue roll, you cannot possibly have too much of this stuff. It really is the ideal kind of product. I buy mine at a car boot sale for £9 a roll. Okay, yeah, just about there. Now, what I tend to do next is, with white spirit, because it's very, very cheap, is I go in now and I clean around the airbrush, get right down into the bottom and clean the inside of the cup. Be careful of these things, you don't knock them over. I am absolutely brilliant at knocking things over. I'm sure it's a sign of old age. Right, so blow that through. That's all gone. Now, with a clean piece of roll, I go into here and give it a good huck out, and that seems fine. I put another drop back in the airbrush, and now I want to see if we've got any paint still coming through, and we haven't. This is just the white spirit, and as you can see, it's whistling along, and there it is, all gone, or nearly all gone. Okay, so now we can dispense with the air for now. I don't know why I'm turning it, it's a pull connector. And you can see I've got a bit of muck on the bottom of there. And now hopefully I can turn this off. And then we strip it down. Now, this is the clever bit. Get a clean area. Okay. Now, the most delicate thing inside is the needle. You take that off, take this out, pull it out. Now, hopefully it should be all clean because we cleaned around it to start with. We washed all the muck out the front. Is that true? Tiny little bit of silver paint left on the needle. Put the needle somewhere safe. And then we turn onto the front of the airbrush to the nozzles. And the next thing is to clean around here. Now I use cotton buds. And rest assured there are people out there who will say, you know, you shouldn't be using cotton buds, they've got little fibres on them, and they're right. And now hopefully you can see here the orangey paint that was left over from the previous, from the first colour that we used. So that was around there. So that's that clean. Put that to one side. Now, depending on your airbrushing, your type and everything else, you may have another crown. We'll weak that one off as well. So the expense, we'll use another cotton bud, and there's no muck in there at all. Put that to one side, and then we're left with the main airbrush itself. Now this one here, you can strip it down further by undoing this, and the whole thing comes apart. But to be perfectly honest, this is absolutely fine. There's no muck on here at all. I think we are finished. You could dismantle this mechanism and pull it out. But why would you want to do that? The best thing to do when you dismantle these is dismantle the whole thing, the trigger assembly, etc., when there's a reason to. And if there's no reason to, leave it in place. So all I need to do now is just clean the bodywork of it a little. And get some of this paint off that was, the muck, and where I overfilled the cap a couple of times and this sort of thing. And get rid of that, and we're good. And if you can see inside, it's absolutely spotless. Right, so all we need to do now, reassemble it. So we have the two crowns, don't lose those. First crown goes on. What I do is sort of finger tight with a little pinch, and then goes the second one up, and these are obviously on there to protect the needle. Next thing is the needle goes back in, beautiful. The rear securing screw which came off, it doesn't have to take that, you can leave that one in place. Now push it right in, pinch tight, put the back on it. Lovely. And then what I do is I go back to the air hose, pop the air hose back on, and these quick release fittings, they're in the show more tab if you need to buy any. Turn the thing back on, and then all I do is put a drop more cleaner through to make sure that it works. So when I push it down the first stage, you should get no liquid, and then when I pull it back, out comes the cleaner, and surprise surprise, it's clean. So there we go, one clean airbrush, and I don't strip it down between colours, I just flush it through. Hopefully that all makes sense. So how have we got on? Well, actually I think the hoppers themselves look absolutely fine. There's no sign of the decals, and I've also removed a few scratch marks. Mind you, at the end of the day, these wagons will be heavily weathered. However, repainting the cradles was far less successful. This is the BR bauxite, which just looks far too sort of rust coloured, as it were. So I switched to the Humbrol, which is far too yellow. So what I did with the Humbrol yellow is I then added some black, which sort of brought it more in keeping. But at the end of the day, we're still not there. So if you've resprayed your HAAs into this earlier cradle colour and you've got a good colour, please let me know. Or of course, if you work for Cavalex or Accurascale, you can always drop me a line and let me know which colour you used. So hopefully you found this little mini series of 3 episodes useful. In the future now, there won't be specific airbrush videos, but I'll be just using airbrushes as I go about the daily sort of Chadwick stuff. There we go. So track work and scenery, that kind of area, when I just get it out, use it, and you'll know the settings that I generally use. Easy as that. Why did I use the enamels on my rolling stock and stuff? Enamel paints are much harder than acrylics. They wear much better, as it were, but they do take a couple of days to harden. Don't think for a moment that you can spray them on, because you can scratch it straight off again. So initially, acrylics are harder, but not in the long term. So there we go. Right, that wraps up this one, and I'll see you in a week's time, because now we're back on the layout doing some scenery. So there we go. If you haven't subscribed, there's the button, but I thank the patrons. Patrons, thank you so much for making it all possible. And for you, there's a video here and here. See you next week. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.